Carlos de la Cruz was a man whose existence was characterized by integrity, diligence, and a profound loyalty to his family. As a businessman who emerged from modest origins, he established his own import-export enterprise, meticulously developing it from the ground up and earning a reputation for fairness and reliability. He was cherished by his family, respected by his employees, and admired by his community. However, it was his relationship with his only son, Charles, that most profoundly defined him. Carlos was a devoted father, dedicating his efforts to shaping Charles's future with the same values and strength that had always guided him. Charles grew up in awe of his father's commitment, patience, and the remarkable resilience Carlos exhibited, even during challenging times. Carlos consistently imparted to Charles the belief that life is about choices, emphasizing that one could always opt to do what is right, even when the wrong path appeared easier. To Charles, his father was not merely a man, he was an anchor, a mentor, and an unwavering source of strength and kindness. Their bond was robust, founded on trust, love, and admiration. Yet, the unpredictable nature of life would soon disrupt this tranquility. Unbeknownst to Charles, the strength his father had instilled in him would later become both a weapon and a burden, propelling him toward actions he had never previously contemplated. Carlos's business, while modest, was profitable, as he specialized in importing rare and exotic goods, often traveling across countries to procure unique items. Although he enjoyed a comfortable living, his success also attracted the attention of local criminals, individuals seeking easy profits. Through manipulation and extortion of those who had diligently earned their wealth, Carlos had successfully navigated threats, remaining under the radar of any significant danger for many years. However, a turning point arrived when he unexpectedly encountered a local criminal organization led by a man named Miguel M.C. Roz, a merciless individual who regarded people like Carlos merely as stepping stones to his own success. Miguel and his associates had become aware of Carlos's achievements and were determined to impose a tax on him, a regular payment for alleged protection against other criminals. Carlos, principled and courageous, firmly declined their demands. He calmly articulated that he would not pay a single cent for something he did not believe in and that he held no fear of Miguel or his gang. To him, the concept of extortion was abhorrent, fundamentally opposing everything he stood for and had worked to achieve. Nevertheless, Miguel was not a man to be easily disregarded. One evening, while Carlos was working late in his modest warehouse office, Miguel and his four accomplices confronted him. Their intention was to intimidate him into submission, to make him recognize the error of his refusal. However, what began as an attempt at intimidation quickly escalated. Carlos, undaunted in the face of peril, stood his ground, defiantly proclaiming that he would never be coerced into actions against his will. Enraged by Carlos's defiance, Miguel commanded his men to make an example of him. The ensuing assault was unrelenting and brutal, exceeding even Miguel's original intentions, and by the time they realized the extent of their actions, it was too late. Carlos's lifeless form lay crumpled on the cold warehouse floor, a testament to the brutality inflicted by men who wielded violence without remorse. They departed, leaving Carlos behind without a moment's hesitation. When Charles received the news of his father's death, it shattered his world. At just 17, he was still a young man in the process of growing and learning. His father had been his hero, and now that hero had been violently taken from him by forces he could not comprehend. The grief was overwhelming, consuming him like an uncontrollable blaze. Yet, alongside this sorrow emerged a more sinister emotion, anger. It was not merely the loss of his father that pained him, it was the manner of his death. The realization that men had chosen to end his father's life out of sheer greed and a lust for power ignited a fierce rage within Charles that he struggled to suppress. The image of his father's once vibrant and warm face, now lost to him forever, haunted his thoughts day and night. Charles vowed to uncover the truth behind this tragedy. He promised himself that one day, he would ensure that those responsible faced justice for their deeds. The years that followed were arduous. Charles took over his father's business, determined to preserve his legacy, yet the weight of this responsibility was immense. He was perpetually haunted by memories of Carlos and the values he had instilled in him. Although he yearned to honor his father's teachings, his anger and resentment simmered just beneath the surface, nurturing a darker aspect of his being. Every facet of the business served as a reminder of Carlos, each interaction with a former colleague, every document he processed, and every client he engaged with was a painful reminder of his loss. The loss of his father served as a painful reminder of the man he had become. No longer merely Charles, a young man navigating life's challenges, he had transformed into Charles the Avenger, tormented by the memory of his father and propelled by an unwavering sense of duty to seek justice for his family. As he matured, Charles's demeanor underwent a significant change. The bright, hopeful son his father had nurtured was replaced by a figure who was cold, reserved, and almost ruthless in his resolve. To the outside world, he appeared as a quiet and diligent businessman, yet within him raged a tempest of growing fury that compelled him to spend countless sleepless nights devising strategies and preparing for the moment he would confront his father's murderers. By the time Charles reached his late 20s, he had undergone a profound transformation. The open and trusting young man his father had raised was gone, supplanted by a colder, more calculating individual driven by a singular mission. For years, Charles had not only mourned his father but had also meticulously plotted his revenge in the solitude of his thoughts. He had created a mental blueprint of vengeance, piecing together fragments of information about the 5 men responsible for his father's death. He understood that the pursuit would demand patience, cunning, and a ruthless approach. The authorities had long since deemed his father's case closed, as the absence of solid evidence and witnesses had led them to abandon the investigation, categorizing it as a tragic incident. Charles was not constrained by the same limitations as others. He did not require legal proof, only an unwavering determination. Over the years, he had discreetly engaged private investigators, gradually compiling information on each of the 5 individuals responsible for his father's demise. He scrutinized their lives with relentless focus, committing every detail to memory, understanding their daily habits, and pinpointing their weaknesses. They had transformed from mere strangers into adversaries, faceless villains whom he knew intimately, embodiments of the malevolence that had shattered his existence. The group that had taken his father's life was a motley crew, each member harboring a dark history. At the forefront was Mick Rios, the mastermind, recognized for his cold, ruthless ambition and his skill in manipulation. A former convict, Mick had been hardened by years behind bars and was driven by insatiable greed. His loyal accomplices were 4 men, each either coerced or lured by Mick's promises of wealth and power, each burdened by their own sins and vulnerabilities. The first was Lucas Ortega, a slender man with a gambling addiction and a severe dependency on cocaine, easily influenced by the allure of quick riches, serving as Mick's right-hand man. Next was Simon Slim Delgado, a wiry and jittery figure known for his intimidation tactics. The third was Thomas Ruiz, a mechanic with a history of assault, who remained fiercely loyal to Mick, viewing him as a pathway out of his impoverished existence. Lastly, there was Jose Montoya, the group's cleaner, often summoned to erase their traces. He was notorious for his ability to disappear without a trace. A talent for remaining undetected had allowed him to operate in the shadows for years. Each man present that night had a specific role, and each bore a share of the responsibility. In Charles's mind, they were not individuals with their own lives and families, rather, they were components of a singular, monstrous entity. To him, they were mere extensions of the malevolence that had taken his father from him, and thus, they had forfeited any claim to mercy. Lucas Ortega, the most vulnerable of the 5, became Charles's initial target. A cocaine addict and gambler, Lucas followed a predictable routine. Charles meticulously observed his every action, identifying his vulnerabilities and biding his time. On a cold, foggy night, Charles made his move. He trailed Lucas as he stumbled out of a bar, intoxicated and unaware of his surroundings. In the dimly lit alley behind the establishment, Charles struck with precision, his approach silent. Lucas never anticipated the attack. Within moments, Charles had him subdued, his hands gripping Lucas's throat as he locked eyes with him, filled with terror. "Do you remember Carlos de la Cruz?" Charles whispered, his tone icy and devoid of emotion. Lucas's eyes widened in fear as he gasped for breath, but Charles paid no heed. With a swift, decisive twist, he extinguished Lucas's life. The first of the 5 was gone, and an unusual sense of tranquility washed over Charles. He had taken the initial step toward avenging his father. Leaving Lucas's body in the alley, he ensured that no trace could be linked back to him. He had studied forensic techniques, mastering the art of leaving no evidence behind. The police would discover a corpse, but they would find no clues leading to him. Simon Delgado was a formidable individual, renowned for his intimidation tactics. He presented an imposing presence, often accompanied by bodyguards. However, Charles possessed the advantage of time. He observed Simon for several weeks, meticulously studying his routines and pinpointing his weaknesses. The opportunity arose one evening when Simon was alone at home, having let his guard down following a lucrative deal. Charles infiltrated the premises quietly, catching Simon unawares. This time, words were unnecessary. The look in Charles's eyes conveyed the gravity of the situation, and Simon recognized that he was confronting his demise. Charles executed the act with precision, ensuring a clean and calculated kill that left no trace. By the time law enforcement arrived, he had vanished into the night like a specter. In contrast, Thomas Ruiz was a skilled mechanic with a violent past. He was both strong and streetwise, having navigated life through sheer force. Charles understood that a different strategy was required for Thomas. Rather than confronting him directly, he chose to leverage Thomas's arrogance and pride. Disguised as a mechanic seeking employment, Charles spent weeks working alongside Thomas, gradually earning his trust while waiting for the opportune moment. When Thomas was finally alone in the workshop, Charles revealed his true identity, allowing Thomas to comprehend who was responsible for his impending end. Although Thomas fought back fiercely, Charles was prepared. After a fierce struggle, he emerged triumphant, leaving Thomas's lifeless form on the floor. Jose Montoya, the elusive cleaner, had always exercised caution, perpetually vigilant. Charles recognized that he would need to approach Jose with particular care. He pursued him for several months, trailing him from city to city, patiently waiting for the right opportunity. Ultimately, in a small, secluded town, Jose let his guard down. Charles confronted him in a desolate area on the outskirts, far from any onlookers. Jose attempted to flee, but Charles was quicker and more resolute. After a relentless chase, he cornered Jose and executed the same form of justice he had administered to others. Jose's death was silent, a calculated execution that left no evidence behind. Charles departed with a tranquil mind, his mission nearing completion. MC Rios was the linchpin of the operation, the individual who had orchestrated his father's murder. Charles had reserved him for last, wishing to relish the moment and ensure Mick comprehended the reason for his impending demise. He discovered Mick living under an alias, evading the law in a remote area. Mick proved to be the most challenging target, shielded by multiple layers of security and cut off from the outside world. However, Charles had come too far to turn back. Disguising himself as a repairman, he successfully infiltrated Mick's compound, methodically bypassing security measures. He eventually reached Mick's private quarters, catching him off guard and confirming that he was alone before disclosing his true identity. "Do you remember Carlos de la Cruz?" he inquired, his voice steady yet laced with lethal intent. Mick's expression contorted in terror as he recognized the figure before him. He attempted to resist, to plead for mercy, but Charles was unyielding. In a deliberate and methodical act of vengeance, he ended Mick's life, savoring the final moments as the man responsible for his father's death took his last breath. With his mission accomplished, Charles understood the necessity of disappearing. He ensured that no remnants of his former self remained. Having meticulously prepared for this pivotal moment, he crafted a new identity, acquired counterfeit documents, and devised his escape plan. He relocated to Argentina, a nation where he could seamlessly integrate into the populace and disappear without a trace. Embracing his new persona, he initiated a tranquil existence, burying the recollections of his past deep within. The individual once known as Charles de Cruz was no more. He had transformed into a specter, residing in the shadows, forever elusive. As time progressed, the murders of 5 men remained a mystery, an enigma that continued to perplex law enforcement. They uncovered not a single clue or piece of evidence that could lead them to the perpetrator. Charles executed his scheme with meticulous precision, leaving no fingerprints, no witnesses, and no trace. In Argentina, he reinvented himself as a new man, a phantom who had avenged his father's death and slipped away into obscurity. The tale of Charles de la Cruz, the son who exacted brutal retribution, faded into mere whispers, a narrative that would remain unresolved. Yet, within himself, Charles understood that justice had been achieved. He had honored his father's legacy and delivered the reckoning that was due. Now, he lived in tranquility, a man devoid of a past, an identity, and any regrets.